Americans are the hardest working people in the industrialized world. The average full-time adult works 47 hours per week. That's way more than the Germans, Dutch, and French. So how would you like to work 32 hours a week instead of 47 hours? Get paid the same. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Well, a company in New Zealand tried it, and they found that worker productivity actually went up. Well, joining us with more is economist Michael Busler. He's a professor of finance at New Jersey's Stockton University. Dr. Busler, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
So tell us about the work hours experiment in New Zealand. How did that work out?
So it was a service company in New Zealand, and they said to their employees, for the next 2 months, March and April, we're going to try an experiment. We're going to pay you the same salary we've been paying you for a 40-hour week, except we're only going to make you work 32 hours. So instead of 5 8-hour days, 4 8-hour days. After the 2 months, they found some very surprising results. One, they seemed to produce just as much output in the 4 days as they did in the 5 previously, and they found that worker satisfaction was up significantly as workers found they had a much better work-life balance, 4 days working, 3 days of leisure. So they declared it a major success, and they think it should be a model perhaps for many more businesses going forward.
Well, so that was in New Zealand. Would it work here in the United States where everyone's used to working hard and many people love getting that overtime?
Yeah, I would have my doubts. I also have my doubts a little bit about this study. It was only carried out for a 2-month period. And they said to the employees, listen, we're going to try this for 2 months. And if it works, we'll continue to pay you for 40 hours and only have you work 32. So there was certainly plenty of motivation for the employees to work a little harder during the 2-month test period to come up with good results. I suspect if the tests were replicated and done over again, and the time period was stretched longer, probably a year, I have a feeling that the results would not have been the same. I think that productivity would have eventually started to level off a little bit, maybe back to the same levels they had during the 40-hour week.
What impact would there be on productivity at a factory, a business that depends on quotas?
Well, it would have a much larger impact. One thing that the business owner didn't mention, I know if I was owned a business and for the last 20 years I've been paying my workers for 40 hours and they've only been doing 32 hours worth of work, I might tend to get a little upset with that. Secondly, if you're looking at manufacturing, typically what's been done is work weeks have been reduced, but the number of hours per day has increased. So instead of 4 8-hour days, many companies, or some companies at least, have switched to from 5 8-hour days to 4 10-hour days. In the medical profession, for instance, in hospitals that have to be staffed 24 hours a day, they've switched, particularly the nurses, they've switched to working 12 hours a day, 3 days a week. And that's tended to work out fairly well for them. I know of some companies that have switched to 4 9-hour days and then half a day on Friday. And that's tended to work out fairly well also. In addition, there are a number of businesses, a number of industries like retailing, where the trend is to go to more hours. They're open 10, 12 hours a day, 5, 6, oftentimes 7 days a week. And if you start cutting employees down to 32 hours a week, you still have to have coverage. That's going to drive up labor costs. We're going to have to hire more people. That'll drive up labor costs. What that may end up doing is causing some more problems with the economy, particularly in sectors where they cut down to 32 hours, and after time, the productivity goes back to where it was before. Now you're paying people for 40 hours worth of work. Maybe they've dropped down to only 32 hours worth of output. That creates pressure on economic growth, so the economy could start to stagnate. And then with all the extra wages, you could see inflation.
It doesn't seem like many American companies would want to pay someone 40 hours and they're only working 32. But my guess is Millennials might like this idea: fewer work hours, more social time, better quality of life. What response are you getting from your students on this idea?
Well, I'll tell you, I've have some experience with millennials that work in the technology sector, many in new startup companies. The companies there, Silicon Valley companies, they have unlimited vacation policy. That is, you can take as much vacation as you want, and there's not rigid hours. Just get the job done. You can work as many hours as it takes. What they found is the employees have been taking less vacation time and they end up working more hours, but they're happier because they have more control over when they can work. So if a family has a child that plays sports after school, you can take a couple hours off and then do the work at whatever time is convenient for you. So I think the millennials, which have particularly the younger ones, which have somewhat of a reputation of believing everything they should get, they're entitled to. I think they too have a good work ethic, and when given the proper motivation and not a lot of control over their life, that they have to be there from 9 to 5, they have to take 2 weeks vacation. So if you do away with some of that, they tend to respond very favorably to that.
What are the chances we're going to see a change in Washington regarding work hours and work time and that kind of thing, maybe legislation, or do you think companies will lead the way and just do this on their own?
Yeah, the current makeup of Congress and the president, they're not likely to have government interfere with this by mandating certain work schedules. However, business wants to be innovative. It pays them to have employees they're very satisfied with what they do, and they may find they'll start experimenting with some differences in the time schedule, and whatever turns out to be positive for them, they'll implement on their own without any kind of government interference with that.
Okay, we're entering a new era now, I think. Some interesting points to ponder. Dr. Michael Busler, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure.